What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. This is TWA Motorsports, and today we are back on the Trans Am project. So some of the things that I would like to accomplish today is several of you guys reached out to me and said you need to reverse the bolts in the rack. So the bolt coming in from the bottom, and the reason you do that is because if you ever had to remove this rack, you have to lift the motor up in order to clear the bolts. So I appreciate you guys reaching out and telling me that, because that is something that I've not experienced. And that is a great tip because, you know, there's a chance it could leak. So let's reverse those bolts. We're going to retorque those. We're going to trim off all these pieces, get all this out of the way because we have no leaks, which is absolutely awesome. That's why all these towels are here. I just didn't want anything to leak on the paint, obviously. And then we're just going to do some more assembly. So maybe try to get the heater core lines back into place, maybe the expansion tank for the cooling or the coolant. I'd like to get the wheels back on as well and get this thing back on the ground so I can move it over to my lift and we can clean on the bottom side of it. But we're also going to torque down our tie rod ends, get the cotter keys in place, and then we're going to go ahead and put grease and all that, just because I don't want to forget that when I get this all together, and that's something that's easy to forget. And then, like I said, we'll get the wheels on. I'm not going to put the fender wells in place yet because I've got a couple other things that I want to do before I get those into place. And then I think the front bumper is going to be one of the last things that I put on. So I haven't messed with the headlight yet, as you guys saw in the last video, or the couple videos back. But I'm also going to route the cable back here to the latch. But let's get started. We're going to go ahead and swap those bolts, flip them over, retorque those, and then we'll go from there. The next thing we're going to torque down is, obviously we went back to 80 on those, and something a little bit alarming is that there was a little bit of fluid on the bottom side of that rack. So I'm hoping it leaked out. I wiped it off, and we're going to check that again. So this rack may be coming back out if it's already leaking. That's not a real great sign. But we're going to torque down the tie rod end. Now 35 foot-pounds is what it calls for, up to 52 in order to get your alignment of the castle nut. So not a whole lot there. We're going to go ahead and torque those down, and then we will put the cotter keys in. Now that we got the cotter key in there and everything tightened up, I'm gonna go ahead and clip off all of these zip ties. And I wish, like I said in the video when I put this K-member in, I wish there was a better way they had of installing these. Maybe you didn't have to use clips, you know, but all in all, it doesn't fit bad and it doesn't look terrible. It's just, I don't know, I wish there was some sort of connector and we could use the factory line just because it would look a little nicer. These things go everywhere when you clip them off. And as you can see, I use several of them on the entire car. But I don't think the brake line is going to go anywhere. Once we get this completed, we are going to go ahead and put the wheels back on. Well, I take that back. We are going to go ahead and fill these grease certs up on the bottom of here and that lower ball joint. So I'm going to go grab my grease gun and fill those up. Well, we now have all of the grease certs filled up. I took all these towels out because I don't have any leaks, or it doesn't seem as though I have any leaks. And I'm going to go ahead, before I put the wheels on and set it down on the ground, I'm going to route the line that goes here to the latch, the steering latch. That way we can go ahead and get it off the windshield and put it back into the proper place, and I have a little more room with it off the ground, the wheel out of the way. Now that we got that line routed back into place, I'm going to go ahead and stick the wheels on. I will say that there's a ton more slack than there used to be. When this thing runs over the hood, it just seems like it routes a little better. It could be a little shorter, but it is in place. You're not going to see any of this anyway, so let's grab the wheels right there and put them on. Now I'm not going to get crazy torquing these down right now because they're going to come back off, but at least get them snug enough where I can roll this thing around. One thing you guys might notice is the tires are towed out quite a bit, and obviously that's going to give me some issues rolling it around. So we are going to get down here and adjust those tie rod ends and pull those wheels in, at least for now, getting it to where we can roll it out of the garage. Now obviously when we get weight on it, and I will try to set it as close as possible before I go get it aligned. Of course it's going to need an alignment, but I'm going to grab a couple wrenches and we're going to pull both these wheels in. Now while I'm adjusting on this, I'm going to give you guys an angle here so you can see the actual wheel pull in. So as you can see, it's quite a bit better now. We don't have the wheels poking out. So now I'm going to set this thing down. I'm going to hook up the steering shaft and I'm going to push it out. We're going to get all this stuff off the lift, and well, we're going to try to get it back up on the lift. Well guys, as you can see, I do have it on the lift again, and I probably should have filmed me putting it over there because it was quite the undertaking. I thought it'd be relatively easy to push it over here, but it was not. Ended up having to use my lawnmower. Anyway, we are going to be working now on cleaning up the bottom side of the car. So I'm going to clean, obviously you can tell where I stopped painting. I'm going to clean from there back. I'm not going to paint this. So I am going to get all the dirt off of it. I'm going to go all the way back to the rear end, and I'm going to stop kind of where the tunnel starts to go up, and we'll do the back side of that later once we get the motor and transmission into place. But ultimately I'm wanting to get the motor back in this car, and so we are going to not only be cleaning this, but we're going to be putting some more components up under the hood. So let's get started. I'm going to go grab some towels and some simple green, and we're going to start scrubbing this down. Well, guys, with just one pass, it looks really good. And like I said, I stopped back there where the rear end starts, and we'll talk about that down the road in a later video. But I wanted to get this cleaned up before I got the motor and transmission into place, and all the, like your heat shields and whatnot. So I think I'm going to go over it one more time, just because I've got some spots that I'm not real happy with. But I'm not going to show you guys that process because, honestly, I think you're probably tired of watching it. So let's cut to it finished, and I'll show you what it looks like all finished up. All right, guys, well, we are finished cleaning the bottom side of this thing. Now, there's some spots that wouldn't come out, but it looks way better than what it did. Of course, it doesn't look as good as where I painted, but I'm not gonna take the time, and I really don't have the facility to strip this down. I would love to be able to take every nut and bolt out of it and base coat, clear coat the bottom, but it's just not worth it. If this car was a show car, I can see people doing that, but then I would find myself not driving it probably because I didn't want to get it dirty. But some areas like this right here, that didn't want to come out. But I was able to get all the stuff that slung out of the rear of the transmission. Pretty sure the transmission is going to need a rear seal. I did not mess with the torque arm because I'm going to be replacing it. I know it's a spoiler alert, but that will be getting replaced, so I did not mess with that. But let's move up to the front because I have a couple of things that I want to go ahead and put in. So the next thing I'm going to be putting on are the sway bar brackets. So if yours are all mangled, these are known to crack. I actually resprayed mine. I cleaned them up real nice and resprayed them. But Detroit Speed actually started making these reproductions. So you can buy a new set, which is really nice that they come out with stuff like this, but I'll list that link below. But like I said, I was able to clean mine up. They weren't cracked or anything, so I'm going to reinstall those. Just 13mm bolts. If you do not know which side goes where, it is honestly the rusty side. I know because there's a little bit of rust pitting on this one, and that was the one that was underneath the battery. Now, once we got those sway bar brackets in place, I went ahead and cleaned up the heater core lines that run to your water pump. Now, I used to use some simple green on the black, and it's not super great, but it's as clean as I could get it. So we're going to put it into place. Now, you're going to need a T40. That's what screws into the actual frame rail. And we'll go ahead and hook the front lines up, but obviously we don't have the motor in or the water pump on, so we won't be able to hook up the back lines. Once we have those lines for the heater core tightened up and the clamps on the back side, we're going to go ahead and put in the horn, which I'm just going back and forth here, I know, but I'm just trying to look for stuff to get out of the floor over here and stuff off the ground. So I went ahead and cleaned up the horn, and we're going to go ahead and put it on. Now it bolts up here, and just one 13mm bolt. Now I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. All these plugs are different, so don't worry about plugging something in the wrong spot. They're just they're all mated up to where they plug in. Now, I tied this up so I could get it on the lift and it not drag, but all this stuff goes in that inner fender that's zip tied to the front here. So, well, I don't know what we're going to do next. Let me look around in this parts and see kind of what our next step is. So after getting the horn put in, I realized there's not a lot else I want to put in before I get the motor into place. So in order to do that, we need to work on the motor mounts. So I'm not going to reuse the stock rubber motor mounts. They've got some cracking in them. I went back and forth on Prothane and energy suspension. It seems like Prothane seems to be the most popular one as far as not getting vibrations or having any issues. So not to say that energy suspension won't have any issues either, but Prothane is the one I'm going to go with, and I'll list this in the parts down below. This is relatively cheap. I think they're like $60 and shipped. So in order to put these in, we do have to drill out these old rivets. So on the back here, we need to drill out these. These are 3/8 bit is what we're going to use. We also need to drill out these 2 rivets. Now, because of their shape, they're not like this where I can stay in the center. I'm going to actually grind the heads off of these and then push them out. To me, that will be a little more simple than trying to drill through those, and it'll probably save my drill bits. So I'm just using a DeWalt with a it's actually a flap wheel. I think that works a little better. So I'm going to go ahead and knock these out, and then we'll get, I'm probably going to spray these before I put the new ones in, but you guys won't have to watch that, and then we'll put the new ones together. Well, now that I've got those ground off, I went ahead and punched them out with the center punch. Actually, it was a chisel, but that's all I could find. And I did drill these with a 3/8 drill bit. You have to drill the 3 on the top side, the ones that you can see through, and just the 2 outers just to make the hole a little bigger. So 3/8 drill bit. Now it says in the instructions that these are mated together from the factory and you got to burn them apart. I don't think I'm going to have to do that, but what I will say is a 3/8 doesn't quite knock off the head of these rivets, so I think I'm going to have to use something to pry it apart here in the center. So I'm just going to use a chisel to chisel my way through this. If not, I may have to go to a step bigger than 3/8. So 3/8 does not get the rivet completely off, so I'm going to go ahead and just grind what's remaining of the rivet off. Well, I did have a torch, but as you can see, I was able to pry that out. So it did leave a little bit left. I'm just going to use a razor blade and go in and knock that excess off. And then we'll scuff these up, paint them, and we'll be ready to go back together. So now these things are painted, it's time to put them together, and it's a pretty simple process, to be quite honest with you. You just need to know that the tab faces down. I've got the instructions here, but the 3 holes that are offset need to be on the top. The 3 holes that are lined up need to be on the bottom. And then, as you can see, there's like a kind of a cutout here to set in this spot. These tabs need to go to the bottom. So all we need to do is bolt this back together, and it does fit kind of snug. So you're gonna have to really press on it to get it together. But then we're ready to bolt it together and get it on the engine. So when you're putting these back together, you're going to want to put the bolts in from the back side, so from the block side. Obviously it won't mount up against the block if you don't. And then you're putting a washer and the nut on this side. And these get torqued down to 30 foot-pounds. So there's 8 of them, so obviously you want to space them out equally. And what I mean by that is, obviously don't put one in this center hole or a center hole on the bottom. You want them to be in the 4 corners. And these are nylock nuts. And you can see it's going to have to pull it together as I torque it down. But the biggest thing you want to make sure of, like I said, other than the bolts going in, is these tabs are at the bottom side. So the side that has the 3 holes that are lined up, not the offset hole in the center. Well, we are all finished up. We got this torqued down to 30 foot-pounds, which is kind of a pain because you're trying to hold them and torque them down at the same time. The good thing is 30 foot-pounds isn't that bad. So now they are ready to go on the motor. I don't think I'm going to show you guys that today, but we are ready to go back on. Well, guys, that does it for today. I think I've got maybe one more thing to do before this motor goes back in the car. So obviously I've got to get those motor mounts mounted to the motor. So in the next video on this car, you are going to see the motor mounts go on, a few other loose ends tied up, and hopefully we'll have the motor back in. So that is the goal in the next video, to set the motor back into place, start tying up things and getting this thing ready to fire. So if you guys like this video, if it's informative, please smash that thumbs up button. As you can see, the ZR1 is gone. I'm sure you guys have already seen that video, but I've got the Camaro up here in the garage, so that means we're going to get started doing some work on it. And so be looking for those videos as well. But if you're not subscribed, guys, go hit that subscribe button. Make sure you ring that bell icon. That way you're notified every time we drop a new video on the Camaro, the truck, the Trans Am, any of the other projects I might buy between now and then or sell. I will give you guys an update. So stay tuned to see what we do next.